All right, y'all. So let me walk you through how to solve problems and kind of the main things you need to know when you're working on velocity and acceleration. So the first thing to go through the equations. So the equations you have are v equals d over t and a equals delta v over t. You can cross out this part because I found it was confusing for people. Instead, write this down, delta v equals vf minus vi. So the different parts of the equations, v means velocity, d means displacement. It does not mean distance. If I mean distance, I will write out distance, but otherwise d is displacement. T is time, that's in both equations for v and a. A is acceleration, and delta v, this is kind of a confusing one for people. It means change in velocity. So the Greek letter delta just means change in, and then whatever comes after it, that's what you're changing. And then VF is final velocity, and VI is initial velocity. So how do you get points? Make sure that you're showing your work. We'll talk about more of this in just a second. But basically, if you get all the answers wrong, but you show your work, you get full points. If you get all the answers right, but you don't show your work, you don't get any points. It's pretty simple because that's how I figure out what you are doing and whether you're on the right track or not. So I need to see your work because I can't read your minds. So I'm going to walk you through problem 3 and show you the different steps of how you do them. So step 1 is draw a diagram. So it says what is the velocity out of an ATV that's going 13 meters in 2 seconds. So you just draw a simple diagram. In this case, I'm just going to draw a vehicle. It's a car, not an ATV, but whatever, it's fine. And then you want to draw any vectors that there are. So it travels 13 meters, so I'm going to show a displacement of 13 meters. I can't really draw time, but I can draw the velocity, even though I don't know what that is, so I'll just write v. So number 2, list the knowns and unknowns. So this is where you list what you do know about the problem and what you're trying to solve for. So what I'm trying to solve for is what is the velocity. So I'm solving for v, and I just write a question mark for that. Then I write down the things given in the problem. So it tells me I go fit 13 meters, so that's a displacement. And it takes 2 seconds, so that's a time. Something that'll really help you with this if you're having trouble figuring out what you need is to look at the units. So whether it's meters or seconds or meters per second, all those units go with a specific thing. So displacement gets meters, time gets seconds, acceleration gets meters per second squared, and velocity gets meters per second. Another important thing to keep in mind is that these first 3 steps, and I'll show you the step 3 in a second, you can always do. Even if you get them wrong, you can always draw a diagram, even if it's a little bit off. You can always try your best to list your knowns and unknowns. You can always pick an equation. You may have trouble with the solving and getting the answer, but you can always do these first 3 steps, and so you should always do them. And if you do, you'll get points for what your work is. So pick the equation. So I look at my list of equations, and I say which has my knowns and unknowns, which has velocity, displacement, and time, and that's this one. So I just write the equation out, v equals d over t. Then I solve. So in the solving section, I'm going to actually plug the numbers in. Now, if this was a more complicated problem, I would need to actually do the work to solve it, but this is not a complicated problem, so just setting that up will be enough. And then we get the answer. So when we divide 13 by 2, we get 6.5, so our velocity is 6.5, but we need to include the unit, so it would be meters per second. Okay, so that should get you started. So now what you're going to do is use that knowledge to help you solve on the second page of the sheet.